All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And today is Monday, July 24, 2023, and the time is 6:01. We are here for the budget workshop of the Coppell City Council, and there is a quorum present, so I will call the meeting to order. The second on the agenda item, citizens' appearance. Ms. Owens, do we have anyone signed up?
We do not have anybody signed up.
So I will forego reading the rules. And agenda item 3, presentation and discussion regarding water and sewer budget. A, the revenue summary by Ms. Kim Tien, as well as B, expense summary.
Thank you, Mr. Captain John. This evening, Jerry Young, our business analyst, will present to you the water and sewer revenues and expenses that are being proposed for fiscal year 24. At the conclusion of his presentation, I will provide you some information on winter averaging. That will be the agenda for this evening. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jerry.
Thank you, Kim. Mayor Pro Tem, Council. Before we start with the numbers, I'd like to share some comments about the Water Sewer Fund. The Water Sewer Fund is the one and only enterprise fund, which by definition means that the revenue generated by the Water Sewer Fund should cover the full cost of providing the service. The full cost of providing the service includes charges from Dallas Water Utility, who provides drinking water to the city, charges from Trinity River Authority, who treats our sewer, as well as operating and maintenance costs, which includes salaries, supplies, annual maintenance, and repair of the water sewer system. Some examples of the maintenance some examples being the maintenance of the pump and lift stations, water towers, as well as equipment used to service the system. So the revenue of the fund should also account for the costs of maintaining and replacing water and sewer infrastructure, as well as any capital costs to expand the system. For example, the water redundancy project is an example of a water sewer infrastructure project. These costs are covered by revenue which is generated by the water sewer rates approved by council. The water sewer fund does not receive any funding from property taxes or sales tax. So we will begin with expenditures and then circle back to revenues, then finish out with a discussion on the impacts of winter averaging. So keeping all that in mind, I'd like to go over the notable changes for expenditures in the water sewer fund by classification found at the bottom of page 4 of your packet. And I'd like to start with the orange portion of the pie chart, the transfer out. So the proposed amount for fiscal year 24 is approximately, again this is for the transfer out, is approximately 2.2 million, which is a decrease of about 21% from fiscal year 23's budget. This account is made up of 2 transfers out, one being for debt service, which is about 2 million of the 2.2, and the other 200,000 is water sewer fully funding its portion of the capital fleet replacement program. The decrease being last year's transfer to the capital fleet replacement program was 600,000 more than the proposed year. So now we'll look at the gray portion, which is services. This is where the cost of water, cost of sewer, utility billing, utility operations, and the annual administrative services reimbursement to the general fund are all located. Services, the proposed amount is about 15.9 million, which is an increase from fiscal year 23's proposed amount by about 1.1 million, or roughly 8%. This is mainly a result of Dallas Water Utility raising their rates on the demand charge and the volume charge, as well as Trinity River Authority increasing their interest in sinking and maintenance and operation rates. Are there any questions for the expenditures for the water and sewer fund?
Councilmember Carroll.
remind me again, how does it work as far as whether it's Dallas Water or what was the other entity, the
Trinity River Authority.
How does that work with our contract with them as far as them resetting rates? What's their flexibility to do that, or how often can they do it? Do they have a every year reset, or how does that work?
So Dallas Water Utilities, they can change their rates on a year-to-year basis.
Okay.
And Trinity River Authorities, they typically have a 5-year forecast where they issue rates based on the amount that they need to recover for that year. So they typically change their rates every year.
And remind me, have we seen Dallas Water increase rates? Do they do it every year, or do they do it just every few years, or how do they usually do it? Is it pretty much annually that they're raising rates?
Yes. So every year they do a cost allocation study, and based on that study, they increase rates.
Okay.
And so they increase rates every year.
How does this?
And Trinity River Authority, so theirs is similar to our general fund, because they have an INS, or an interest in sinking, for their debt, and then an M&O for maintenance and operations. And they do a 5-year plan. And so they project out what they think their rates are going to be for both of those areas over the 5 years, and they adjust them. I will tell you, back in 2020, they projected that rate increases would be between 4% and 7% for 2021 through 2024. This year, the impact of TRA on the budget is an 11% increase, not a 7%.
Okay. And so, how do we usually? I guess we then react to it, and we have to reset our. At some point, we have to reset our rates.
We will
correct?
talk about that a little bit later.
Okay, so
You're ahead of us.
I'll keep that question till later then. Thanks.
Councilman Walker?
So I recall that we came close to hitting a particular threshold in water usage that would have permanently increased our water rates. But is any part of that the reason for the spike in the costs on the Dallas Water Utilities side?
They're separate from each other. They are not related.
Okay.
The 18.5 million that we are allocated from Dallas Water Utility, that they're allowed to change the costs for their demand charge with their cost allocation study, but they're independent of each other.
Okay, so that was just another potential rate increase of another sort.
So we are still only paying for an 18.5 million gallons of demand per day. That 18.5 million gallons per day demand we didn't have to increase that.
Okay.
That's the question.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Neville?
That's a question. So, in the when you were introducing and kind of giving the description of the enterprise fund, so you were talking about all things that are related to delivering water and water service, and like maintenance on certain items comes out of this fund, correct?
Yes.
If I'm gonna throw out like so the kind of the refurb that we're doing, on the pump station, we talked about, when we're getting the new pumps and generators and kind of reworking that station, did that come from this fund?
Yes, those items would come from this fund.
Excellent. And then maybe a potential question for you might be is, obviously we had the water issue that popped up last month where a piece of, it was electricity that caused, the kind of the start of the chain reaction of events. If we wanted to improve, like maybe, let's say hypothetically, bury the power lines that are around that area so something like that never happens again, could the Water and Sewer Fund fund that if it was directly related to a water project? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
It does. It would be a funding source. In talking with Encore, they have a program. It's a very lengthy program that gets into potentially burying lines. What they do is they pick up the cost and then pass that on to the residents and the businesses.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there is a way.
Mm-hmm.
They're just starting to feed me that information, so I don't have enough to.
Absolutely. Just trying to think about like funding sources for, let's say, if we wanted to try to protect, incoming power to some of the critical infrastructure pieces, if that might be an additional revenue source versus a general fund type of thing. I'm sure we will all have discussions about power here and stuff, so excellent. Okay, thank you very much.
mentioned that they are looking into it. Is that an option for us, or are they just going without?
No. No, it is strictly up to the council because it's really expensive, really expensive. And if you go down that particular path, when I say you, the council, you will be taking votes along the way. So nothing will be spent without the council giving the okay. Encore will not do that on their own.
But they are looking into it.
If we ask
Oh,
them
if
to.
we ask,
They're
okay.
giving us the information that eventually some point I will have to present to you and say, is this something where you want us to spend our energy to pursue?
I'm really proud of you right now.
Councilman Walker.
Are we going to cover the revenue summary
We are,
next or whenever?
we like to take things out of order.
Okay, no, it's all. Okay, I had a question about that, but I'll let y'all present first.
Was the work they were doing yesterday,
I'm sorry.
the electrical work they were doing yesterday on the lines across the street from the pump station, did that have anything to do with redundancy or anything, or do you know?
I don't know. I know there's a lot of work being done over there related to the generator still, but I don't know about that.
Okay.
All right. So move on to the water and sewer revenue. And I like to highlight that 98% of the revenue generated in this fund stems from water and sewer sales. The other 2% is listed in the table provided to you on page 2 of your packet. On page 3, there's a pie chart of the same information that I will cover. Excuse me. So the blue portion of the chart is water sales. The proposed budget for water sales is at roughly 2.2 million, which is up about 2% from the previous years. This is based on 5-year trends and current rates. I'm sorry, 12.2 million. Sorry. But it's based on 5-year trends and current rates. Next is sewer sales, represented by the red portion of the chart. And we budgeted around 7.1 million for fiscal year 23. The proposed budget is 6.3 million. This year, the approach to budgeting was based on the impact of winter averaging that Kim will lead a discussion on. So before we get into the impact of winter averaging, are there any questions outside of the sewer sales revenue?
My question is about winter averaging, so I will wait.
Good.
Okay. Next slide. So next we're going to cover the impact of winter averaging. So as a quick reminder for those who aren't as familiar with winter averaging, it only affects the sewer portion of your total water bill. It's an attempt at fine-tuning your billed sewer amount by taking the winter months of November through March, tossing out the high and low, and averaging the remainder. We do this because during the winter months, there's little outdoor water usage, so the water being used in your home enters the sewer system. Once we obtain the average, the customer sewer charge is locked in from April to March of the next year. Then we repeat the cycle. This past April marked the first billing cycle with winter averaging implemented. So with that, I will now turn it over to Kim.
Thank you. I thought I would start with this slide that has information that I shared with you at the workshop in September of last year. If you recall, at that meeting I shared that the change in sewer revenue could be reduced anywhere from $163,000 to a little over $305,000 with the implementation of winter averaging. That the change would depend on if and how much customers altered their typical water usage or those habits around water during the months of November through March. And so this was based on our prediction, which was based on historical information. And now, now that we have the winter averages, because we collected that data from November through March and began billing based on that winter average in April. So we have that. And this next slide, we'll kind of walk you through how we got to the 6.3 million for sewer revenue. We were seeing a trend upward with our sewer revenue because if you recall, it was based on a cap of 13,000 gallons. So people in the summer, when you're doing your outdoor watering, there was the potential that you were paying for sewer usage on irrigation, right? So that's why you use winter averaging, is because it captures those months when people typically aren't watering outside. And so what we did is instead of looking at where we were seeing the trend upward, we took a 5-year average of actual revenue. So from 2019, which is when we implemented the advanced water meter system, to even we used the first 6 months of 23, the average that we were actually receiving in sewer revenue is the 6.7 million. It's about 6.7. So then taking what we know that we're going to receive, assuming nobody moves and everybody stays in their homes, we know what we're going to be billing them for the next 12 months, working in some the commercial, we're projecting that it's going to be 6.3 million that we're going to receive in sewer revenue. So we projected about a $305,000 reduction, and we're seeing about a $400,000 reduction. So, I should go back and share. The calculations are all based on current rates. No change in rates. It's also based on the increase that Jerry shared with you with Dallas Water Utilities and with TRA. So it includes the increase in expenses related to those two items. And the Dallas Water Utilities rate increase, when you look at the volume and the demand, it went up 5% from the fiscal year 23 adopted budget to what we're projecting in fiscal year 24. TRA's increase went up 11% from what we budgeted in 23 as adopted to what we are proposing for fiscal year 24 based on the rates that we have been shown. And we got recent rates in July.
Kim, I just want to interrupt you. I'm going to something Donna asked. I need you to check me on this.
Okay.
But I don't believe for the last 2 years we have done a rate increase as a result of the DWU or the TRA increases in cost. We've been absorbing the increases. This is primarily because we were doing the automated water system and we didn't want to do a transition and change rates at the same time. We had that discussion with council. And then we didn't want to do winter averaging, changing the rates at the same time so people could compare this year to last year.
Right.
So we're at least 2 years behind, least.
We have not done a rate increase since 2018.
Oh, okay.
Because
Longer than that.
2019 is when we did the
The
water
automated
meters,
rate,
and then we
okay.
needed to take the time, we just implemented winter averaging for this year.
So I just want to be clear because when we're talking about rate increases, we're not talking about rate increases as part of the budget process right now.
Right.
We come to you later when she's going to explain when the analysis is done about what the rates should be based on not only the rates for transparency passing through, but also capital improvements and everything. So I just wanted everybody to understand from a base standpoint, we haven't been increasing the rates. And if you remember, some of the council members, we had made a commitment back in the mid-teens that we would consistently pass on the DWU and the TRA rates just to keep everything unequal, right? So we chose not to do that, rightly so, because we were transitioning the system and to winter averaging. So we will see us coming to you with a recommendation for rate increases this winter.
Real quick question, is that because the rates are set on a calendar year basis?
It's the way, go ahead. Yeah, you go ahead, that goes to your presentation
Okay.
now.
So I'm gonna move to the next slide.
Okay.
Which is what's next. So we have enlisted the services of a consultant to help us analyze the rates. And so from July through October, the consultant is performing a rate study for us. So he's taking all the data now that we have the winter averaging. He's looking at the increases from TRA and Dallas Water Utilities. As Mike said, he's looking at what are our infrastructure, so what bonds do we need to issue to maintain our system. He'll be looking at all of that, And then in November and December is when we come to council, and he'll do a presentation letting you know the results of his study. We typically do not recommend a rate increase until February. And the reason we do that is that February people aren't using water. So it gives them time to see the impact of a rate increase before they start using a lot of water in the summer. The other piece is it gives people, now that we're doing winter averaging, that goes in effect to April. So it gives them February and March to see the impact of a rate increase on their averaged volume that they're being billed on. And then April is when the rate increase and the new volume, so they can see the difference, right, in their water bill based on the two different factors that are impacting that. So that's why we do that. We build the budget based on current rates and show you that, and then allow the rate study and the consultant to come in. And we do that rate study about every 3 years.
Councilman Wolf.
So are the TRA and DW, are they setting their rates on a calendar basis?
They do.
So when do we get notice of their rate increase?
Well, it's not calendar. Their fiscal year runs a little bit off. They're
November?
We are October to September. They are November to October.
Okay.
Right, and so TRA will tell us in February what they're projecting, and then in July, they tell us what they're taking to their board.
Okay.
And then Dallas Water Utilities, we don't find out until July. And then they take it to their board or their council, right, the October timeframe, I believe. It usually is what they show us in July.
Okay.
Because it's based on their cost allocation study.
Okay, thank you very much.
And it's the rates that they charge all of their member cities.
Right.
Okay.
That would, yes.
So any questions on the timeline? I have one other piece of information I did want to share with you. I thought you might want to know about retained earnings. So this just shows you that for the fiscal year 24, the budgeted operating expenses are about $20.5 million. And I say operating because this is removing out the transfer to the capital replacement fund. So that $200 and some thousand transfer to capital replacement, that's a one-time transfer. I backed that out. So your expenses per day are about $56,000 per day. Retained earnings is projected for fiscal year 24, so at 9/30/2024, we projected undesignated retained earnings to be about 10.7 million. Dividing the expenses per day, we have about 191 days of expenses and undesignated retained earnings. So our retained earnings policy is 180 days, so that it leaves 11 days or about 619,000. So we still are in good shape, but it's time to do the rate study because we wouldn't be able to continue to cover the additional cost of winter averaging or TRA or Dallas Water Utilities. Are there any questions on this?
Councilmember Walker.
Sorry to be question boy. Okay, but so the increase or the decrease rather in sewer sales is predicated on a 5-year average, but as between last year and this year, there's about an $830,000 decrease in sewer sales. So what would cause such a sharp decrease in a single year?
Well, one, the 7 is based on budget. And we're seeing, for the last couple of years, we were seeing actual, last year I think it was 7.1 that we got in actual revenue, and the year before it was about 7 million. So when we did the 23 budget, we had based it on what we were seeing the trend being. When we went back and wanted to look at what was the 5-year average, it was the 6.7 is what we actually was received in revenue over the past 5 years. That was the average. And we knew we couldn't use trend because we're not capping at 13,000 gallons, right?
Right.
So now it's based on a winter average, which is less than that.
Okay.
And so that's why we felt like it was a better comparison, looking at what did we actually bring in, what do we know the winter average is going to be, because we know what we're billing all residents every month.
Yes, ma'am. So on the fiscal year 22-23 adopted budget, that's an actual amount that we gained in revenue on sewer sales?
The 7.1 that we budgeted?
7.13, yes, ma'am. That's on this pie chart.
It was an estimate.
Okay. Do you know Do you know what the actual sewer sales were for that same period?
Well, we're not done yet.
Okay, okay.
So,
So it may not be quite as big a
It-
cutoff.
I would expect it not to be.
Okay.
I would expect when I come to you in September to do the last budget amendment that I'm amending sewer sales down.
Okay, okay, that's very helpful. Thank you very much. I have no more questions, Mayor Pro Tem.
Anyone else? Let's go. We have.
That concludes our presentation, and if there's any other discussion.
Yes, please. Item number 4 was the presentation you've already done, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I will ask
Councilmember
one,
Carroll.
if I can. So your days operating expenses or whatever, so I was looking at apparently an incorrect number somewhere, but I was trying to see, we're gonna run at a deficit is what we're projecting for this year, is that right?
Correct.
$3 million, 3.5 something, I didn't add it up, but that ultimately we're gonna run at a deficit, which I assume we would just absorb out of fund balances, that's,
Right, and
And-
that's what we said in September,
Mhm.
when we said that we were gonna move to winter averaging. When we
Right.
brought that, we said that we would cover that with
yeah.
retained earnings.
And that's all, that all makes sense, but this, I think this slide threw me off, so what is running a deficit, is it gonna change anything on this retained earnings policy? Is
No.
it gonna impact this negatively at all?
No, because the retained earnings that I'm picking up here, the fiscal year
Projected.
2024 projected and
Is that
designated.
after?
That is after,
the
that's
deficit?
taking,
Okay.
adding fiscal year 24
Okay,
revenue, subtracting expenses, and
Okay.
coming down.
okay, so we're good, okay, that makes sense, thanks.
Yes.
Any other question, discussion? Okay. Okay, seeing there's none. Item 5 is citizens' appearance. Ashley, Ms. Owens, is there anyone else that has signed up from the
No.
beginning today?
Would anybody like to sign up?
Okay,
Didn't get to do this.
well, moving on to item number 6, adjournment. There being no further business before the council, we are adjourned at
You can stay.
6:29 PM.